Oh, Chair Vegas, if you could use your microphone.
Very good. Thank you for that. We'll go ahead and call to order the Capital Area Regional Tolling Authority meeting of June 11th, 2025. And we'll start off with the pledge. Sergio, would you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, very good. So clerk, if you will call the roll to establish a quorum.
All right, directors, when I call your name, please indicate your presence. Director Aceves. Here. Chapman. Here. Soon for Kennedy, absent. Vice Chair Early, absent. Chair Villegas.
Here.
Ex officio members Click. Here. Deloria. Here. Talamantes, absent. We do have a quorum.
Right, very good. Moving on to public communications. This is the opportunity for anybody to speak on items that are not on the agenda, but within generally the subject matter jurisdiction of this body. Is there anybody here to sleep on items, not speak on items? You can sleep on items if you want to. If you want to speak on items that are not on the agenda, now would be the time to submit a slip.
There's no public comment.
Very good. We'll move on. Last bit of housekeeping. So this is opportunity for any members of this body to disclose any conflicts this time. Seeing none. We'll move on to our action items, starting with the agenda item 1, which is the toll exemptions policy decisions. And I think, Sam, you're going to kick us off.
Yes.
And we'll welcome Director Talamantes.
Good afternoon, Sam Souls with HNTB, and today we have an action item for you. Is that okay? Can you hear me okay? For toll exemptions, if you recall last meeting, we previewed this item, toll exemptions along with toll discounts, with the idea to bring toll exemptions back for action today. The toll discounts portion of the last workshop won't come back until August. That includes any kind of discounts for vehicle types or occupancy. And at that time, we'll be able to bring forward some data so that those decisions can be data informed as you deliberate those. So if you recall, we have 2 buckets, so to speak, of discount options. Ones that are legally required and ones that are usually exempt by toll authorities, specifically in the state of California. Okay. Legally required is emergency vehicles. And then within the bucket of usually exempt, we have vehicles such as van pools, any kind of mass transit, public transit, paratransit, CHP express lane patrol officer vehicles, as well as express lane maintenance vehicles. So I'm going to give a refresher on some of the specifics around these. Per statute, vehicles that are responding to an emergency are exempt from paying a toll in the express lanes or on a toll road or toll highway. That's when they're actively responding to one. So typically their lights are on and they're using that preferential lane to be able to respond in time. We have other California vehicle codes, as well as US codes, Title 23, Section 166. That includes definitions around public transportation vehicles, mass transit vehicles, blood transport vehicles, paratransit, and over-the-road buses. Those are the coaches that have luggage underneath the seating. Those are typically exempt. Van pools, registered van pools specifically are exempt, with the idea that those are registered to be able to carry high occupants. And then officers that are patrolling the express lanes, and we'll talk a little bit about that in our later workshop, but these are ones that are processing moving violations and things like that on the facility that they do not pay a toll. And then same for maintenance vehicles. So Caltrans vehicles, or if we have a toll system integrator that's performing any kind of maintenance activities that are using the express lane, those are exempt from paying the toll at that time as well. As part of staff's recommendation, I have the bullets here listed. These are also the words that show up within the toll policy that was provided as an attachment 1B in your staff packet. As far as discussion that happened at the technical advisory group, there was consensus. There was one question about motorcycles, and we are going to bring that back as part of the discount discussion. So the difference between a full exemption versus say 100% discount, we didn't want to muddy those waters. So the motorcycle conversation will be coming back in August with the rest of the discounts. And with that, I will take any questions or clarifications or a motion to approve.
Are there any initial questions before we ask if there's any public comment?
I could wait after the public call.
So, do we have any slips to speak?
There's no public comment on this
All right,
item.
anybody intending to speak on this item? Seeing nobody come forward, we'll turn it back to the body here for further comments or questions. Yep.
Yeah, just a quick clarifying question, and thank you for the presentation, Sam. One of the things that I think is covered already, and I just want to clarify is, construction. Should there need to be construction here, that would be non-operating hours, and that's how that would be covered for the tolling lane? Because maintenance is covered, but what about future construction activities, I guess is my question.
So if construction is closing down the lane, we
Right.
probably wouldn't be tolling anyways.
That's
But
my
yes,
point.
we would be able to handle that with either non-tolling mode or in the event that we had certain vehicles that needed to be exempt. I think there could be ad hoc policy that would be able to handle that.
But yeah, because you're right, it wouldn't be an ongoing thing, it would be a specific project coming in, et cetera. So that could be handled through future board actions if needed.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Nope. Questions? Yeah, yes, sir.
Just a comment, I think this list looks acceptable. This list looks acceptable to me, and I'm glad to see there isn't, any exemptions for high occupancy vehicle lanes. We just learned from Washington DOT, Washington DOT, their management of toll lanes, they found there's a lot of challenges trying to enforce on high occupancy vehicles, so.
So, may I, Chair?
Yeah, please.
Just to clarify a couple things. For this particular item for action today, these are exemptions. So these are wholesale exemptions of vehicles, not necessarily any kind of occupancy based or any tiered pricing based conversations for discounts. So that occupancy conversation, HOVs, will be covered in the August meeting.
Okay.
And the workshop this afternoon will start also addressing some of the nuances of that, including the challenge that you just noted.
Got it. Thank you.
Also, just for clarity for anybody else who might be joining us for the first time, the YOLO 80 project's environmental documents, adopted alternative is a high occupancy toll 3+ lane. CARTA will need to take action related to a carpool discount, but it's anticipated that there will be a carpool discount.
And I read maybe, are there any other? So in terms of the action that we took at the last meeting in terms of the dynamic pricing structure allows us some flexibility. And I know this is in draft, but oftentimes it moves pretty quickly to final form. So I just want to understand, maybe I'm missing it. So in terms of hours of operation, okay, I'm reading it correctly now. So vehicles entering the CARTA toll facility outside of the hours of operation of that facility fall under the category. That's getting further down the road. So I'm good. Just wanted to make sure I'm understanding it.
Yeah, absolutely. Said simply, right, if we're not collecting tolls, we're not going to charge any tolls to the vehicles during the time that we're not collecting tolls. Is what
I'm
that
still caught up on
fancy
what,
says, yeah.
I'm still caught up on what Director Sim referenced in terms of the meeting that we had. And we did, so full disclosure, there were some of us who had the opportunity to meet with Department of Transportation Tolling Authority Director in Washington State, given where they are relative to tolling. And it was a great conversation to have them share with us lessons learned, a little bit of a look back of what they would have done differently. So it was great information for us to sort of digest, ask questions and dialogue around that. So I was getting ahead of myself a little bit in terms of what I learned there. So, okay. Yeah, it was really helpful, super helpful. No, we didn't meet with the county executive, but we met with the staff that and Matt, you can probably speak to this because you hired them, worked with them, worked for them. I mean, it's,
Little bit, didn't hire, didn't hire them, but I've worked with them in the past. So in Washington State, the Washington State DOT has a tolling entity built into the Department of Transportation, much like Florida and some other ones. So what the chair and some of the staff met was with the Washington State DOT sort of tolling group. It's about 57 people inside of the department that handles all the tolling functions in Washington State. Yeah.
yeah, very helpful, very, super helpful. And more to come. I think we've been talking about, really getting outside to see other operations and how they function and what works and what doesn't, so that we're going in to the degree that we can, eyes wide open, right? Okay, so are there any other comments or questions on Sam's presentation on this item? If not, we need this is action item required.
Motion.
So we have a motion and a second.
I'll second.
All right, Chapman. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item is action item number 2, and that's the toll program management request for proposals on the on-call qualifications. Kathleen, you're kicking that one off.
That's right.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Great to have a full CARTA board here this afternoon. So appreciate y'all making it out for these 4 items. So my presentation for this action item, item 2, will do a bit of a recap of the discussion we had way back in February on how we want to staff CARTA and what we want its overall structure to look like. Because really this action item is implementation of the direction that you all provided to us as staff back in February. Then I'll go through the scopes of work of the 2 contracts that are before you for request for approval to release, talk a bit about the procurement schedule, and then the details of the staff recommendation. As a reminder, we talked about there are really kind of 4 very large buckets of things that CARTA needs to do. The sort of executive direction piece, toll program management, finance and administration, and kind of miscellaneous support services. This graphic displays the staffing structure that the board approved back in February. I summarize it by saying right now, SACOG performs about half of these functions, right, in partnership with HNTB, which is a 1-year contract. In 2026, we're going to move to a transition where SACOG continues in the finance administration capacity for CARTA, but the sort of toll and agency work moves to a consultant and then ultimately an executive director in late 2026, 2027 timeframe. So this item before you, item 2, is really talking about these 2 pieces of the puzzle. This new tolling consultant contract from 2026 to 2028, and a set of new on-call contracts to support the miscellaneous services that CARTA needs. The toll program management contract is broken into 2 types of tasks. There are 6 base tasks and 4 optional tasks. A summary draft scope of work is included as attachment 2A to your staff report. Looking first at the base tasks, the first 3 you can really consider to be kind of general agency and startup related tasks. So you have task 1, that's overall toll program management, bringing items to the board, working with the CARTA technical advisory group, meeting with stakeholders, contract invoices, all of that kind of administration of what CARTA needs to do. The second piece is related to agreements, toll revenue, reconciliation, the kind of finance pieces of CARTA. SACOG will continue to do the kind of day-to-day accounting, annual budget development process for CARTA, but there's a larger conversation that needs to be had on how do we structure the agreement with the back office? How do we structure the agreement with our roadside toll vendor? How do we make sure all of the information and money that's flowing between those vendors is accurate? And how do we report on the accuracy of that movement of money and data to the board? And so task 2 is really the kind of technical fiscal pieces of what CARTA has to do. Task 3 is a public education piece. So this involves developing communications materials to educate the members of our community on what a toll facility is, how to use our express lane, how to sign up for an account, where they can get a transponder, and some of those pieces. I'll flag for you right now that there are very similar base and optional tasks related to public education and communication. So let me dive into that right now. The set of 6 base tasks, from staff's perspective, this is like the minimum viable product of CARTA. we have to do these 6 things in order to get YOLO 80 on the ground, have a tolling authority, and get going in 2028. The optional tasks provide flexibility and also expand on these services for things that we should do as a smart business proposal, but not necessarily have to do, to give some flexibility as we continue to generate the startup costs for CARTA, right? So there's a little bit of a cost efficiency opportunity between the base and optional tasks. Okay, so then task 4, that's the YOLO 80 toll system construction support. CARTA is going to have to issue a contract for the services to collect toll transactions with a private vendor on the YOLO 80 facility. CARTA is going to have to oversee that contract, ensure that vendor delivers that product on time, maintains it up to standards, hits its performance indicators. And so all of that sort of staff work that the consultant will do for the YOLO 80 toll system is housed under task 4. Task 5 is very similar, but instead of the toll system, it's the back office piece of the puzzle, customer service center. So it's a relationship with an existing tolling authority, everything it takes to make sure all of that is delivered on time. So really task 4 and task 5 are YOLO 80 delivery specific, right? These are tasks that in the construction of YOLO 80 are directly attributable to the construction and then are directly attributable to the operations. And similarly, once we have multiple corridors, right, they'll have similar expenses, but for their own corridors, whereas tasks 1, 2, and 3 are sort of shared agency functions. That's where we're finding efficiencies from having one tolling authority. And then task 6 is after we start collecting revenue, all of the task 4 and task 5 activities roll into task 6. So it's just a clean way for CARTA's budget to sort of say 4 and 5 is until we collect our first toll and 6 is after. On the optional tasks side, I mentioned there are 4. So task 7 is toll tag penetration. So we've talked about this here at the board and gotten some general direction that the board is very interested in trying to make sure we have as many toll tags, toll transponders in people's hands as possible so that we have the cheapest, most efficient way of collecting tolls when we go live. So this is provided as an optional task so that we can establish a separate budget and really do an intensive campaign to get as many of those transponders out on the streets as possible, depending on what resources are available to CARTA as we get closer to construction. Task 8 is for technical advising services. This is a flexibility kind of category optional task. This is a contract for 3 years to staff an agency that's going to evolve a lot in 3 years. So task 8 is scoped to provide CARTA the flexibility to ask for additional services on specific topics. So let's say autonomous vehicles become a big thing in the next 2 years, or something major changes with legislation. CARTA has the resources necessary to be able to kind of tap into that and get what it needs on an optional basis. Task 9 is for a regional equity program development. As the board knows, CARTA applied for a Caltrans planning grant. We won't find out until July or August whether or not we got that planning grant. If we do get it, we'll have to procure that separately. That's part of the requirements of the Caltrans planning grant. But if we don't get it, we still certainly need a regional equity program. And so this optional task gives us the ability to do it in the case where we don't get the Caltrans planning grant. And then task 10 is really focused on future corridor implementation. This RFP is proposed as a 3-year contract with 2 option years. Staff don't anticipate a ton of development on other corridors really coming online, us building a toll corridor in the next 5 years. Depends on how I-5 goes a bit, but in case that schedule changes and it comes online faster, task 10 gives us the flexibility to access those additional resources as needed, should that schedule change. Any questions on these tasks, since there was a lot here, before I move to the on-call? And then talk a bit about staff recommendation.
I just had one question,
Yep.
Kathleen. So in terms of the base tasks, there's elements in there that we've been talking about. So how does that line up, or is there going to be a timeline by which you lay out what tasks will be accomplished by what timeline so that it's being discussed? I mean, your staff's going to be working with a consultant, obviously, to address the base tasks. Is there going to be a timeline that this body will participate in those discussions so that staff is representing a collective discussion around those items? Because some of those we've already talked about a little bit, but obviously
in more detail. Yeah. So I think a couple things. Item 4 before you, the info item today, is a draft work plan that looks at CARTA's work over the next 3 years. So that really gives you a kind of high level sense of what the schedule is, both for y'all as a board and for CARTA as an agency, but also for this consult, right? To understand what work needs to get done when. But this consultant team will also be coming directly to the board, requesting actions, bringing items, right? So this is going to be your staff functionally. You'll have an executive director, but this is the other folks who are bringing the detailed discussions before you for decision.
Just have a very minor comment on optional task 7 toll tag penetration. So, and it's probably not germane to everything, but so I've been involved in projects where pre-opening we spend tens of millions of dollars on marketing to try to drive up penetration, and I've been in jobs where we spend zero, and the result is about the same. And so I would just really caution about how much pre-opening marketing money you spend, because there will still be a natural ramp up, and you don't necessarily know how many tags are in this corridor anyways. So I'd just be mindful of that and think about, you know, if you get 3 months, 4 months, 6 months out post-opening and ramp up and you're still having an issue, to maybe think about that. But just think about the premature spend, because you can throw a lot of money at this and not move the needle that much. Most of the folks will not pay a lot of attention to that. Then they'll decide one day, you know, they want to use that corridor. Then they'll go online, figure out how to do it, and then they'll get a tag. So that would just be my 2 cents on that.
Very good. Okay. So, all right.
I'll keep it moving. So the second procurement we're requesting approval to release is for an on-call services request for qualifications. So, right, compared to a toll program contract, which has a set number of years, a not to exceed budget, we have a really clear sense of what tasks are needed over those years. On-call services is a bench. So it'll be a more efficient procurement. And these are additional services that CARTA may or may not need over the next 3 to 5 years, and that don't necessarily need to be part of that team that's really delivering CARTA for you as agency. So there are 4 categories proposed for the bench on-call services: the civil oversight and environmental support. As other toll projects are coming online, CARTA will work in partnership with Caltrans and other project sponsors to overview the design, right-of-way, environmental phases of those projects as they're getting delivered. And so these are sort of specialized engineering consulting services that CARTA can leverage to participate in those conversations and make sure that CARTA is really there every step of the way as projects are being developed. This is really a lesson learned. Obviously, CARTA didn't exist when we were making YOLO 80, but there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle now that it's clear there would have been a different perspective on in different conversation had we had a tolling authority when we were putting the project together. Category 2 is related to traffic and revenue analyses. There's one already being conducted for YOLO 80, but again, as future projects come online, we'll need to do more analysis on what expected revenue from those corridors might be. It's best for the tolling authority to do that, since it's ultimately the entity that will collect that revenue. So analyzing the revenue makes sense to generally sit with the tolling authority. Category 3 is related to community engagement and government relations. This is really kind of local, on the ground community engagement activities, again, that we don't anticipate CARTA needing, but want to be able to provide the executive director and team the resources that they might need to go to your eggplant festivals or host a community conversation if some real acute need comes up over the next 3 to 5 years. And then the last category 4 is for financial planning and infrastructure financing. This is to have CARTA help project partners develop a funding strategy for future projects. That may include going after things like TIFIA, infrastructure financing with the government, bonding. Those are really complicated processes that require specialized services, and so those would fall under category 4. So the idea with the RFQ is CARTA will release it, all the qualified firms will sit on the bench, and then on a task order basis, as approved by the board over a certain amount, CARTA will sort of issue the task, they'll all propose, and then a firm from the bench will be selected to move those services forward. Okay. A bit about schedule. So we're here in June requesting approval to release, negotiate, and sign. The plan is to issue the toll program contract in early July, put that RFP out to bid, have it open for about 2 months, do interview and selection in September, contract and negotiations in October and November, and hopefully be able to bring on that new team by December, so that as SACOG is transitioning off in its project management capacity, as the HNTV team's contract time is ending, there's opportunity for overlap for all of us to information share and blend. Yes.
For the interview selection, is your team gonna be doing the interviews or are you gonna be having board members?
So,
Gonna be a
yep.
board member.
So the staff recommendation is to request a board member be delegated to sit in finalist interviews. But the interview selection will be done by a panel of staff with representation from each member. So PCTPA, EDCTC, SACOG, Caltrans, YOLO TD. The on-call contract is slightly delayed. It's also a shorter process, right? So we'll start in August and then go through interview selection, contract negotiations, and still ending the year with those agreements in place. You'll notice there's no contract work start date, right? Because it's on call. So unless a task order comes up, we won't necessarily start work with those folks. It'll just depend. For clarity, I've added some other schedule information for you to sit with on how all these pieces fit together. We'll be coming back to you in September to talk about the process to hire a recruiter to recruit the executive director, do some recruiting through the winter and start contract negotiations in the spring as a general schedule, and hoping to have that executive director on board mid next calendar year. And then I've included the kind of HNTB, SACOG program support pieces of the puzzle. Really what you're looking at is that December, January timeframe, very critical for transition between all these two teams, which is why we're here before you so kind of early in the year to try to get this procurement started to make that happen. Okay, with that, there are 3 parts to staff recommendation. We're authorizing release of the request for proposals for the toll program management contract as a not to exceed budget of $5 million. And also requesting that the board authorize the secretary, that would be James Corliss, to select the vendor, negotiate, execute the contract, all of those pieces together. Similarly, requesting authority to release the request for qualifications for on-call. There's a maximum budget of $1 million per agreement, but again, there'll be individual task order-based budgets. If they're under $100,000, the procurement policies CARTA uses state that staff can issue those without board. If they're over 100, we'd come back to you to say, this is the proposal and get your approval to release those task orders. The third piece of the staff recommendation, as we've discussed with Director Talamontes, is to nominate a board member to participate in the toll program management finalist interviews. Staff is really recommending this because of this period in the first part of next year where the project manager of the consultant serves as your interim executive director, right? They'll be the main person running your board meetings, bringing the items before you and taking your questions. So we feel like it's important for the board to, if you desire, to have that direct influence on who that person you'll be interfacing with. So how that would work is that the staff team would review the written proposals, analyze, select the finalists for the interviews, and then the board member would join for the finalist interviews. With that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. Are there any questions initially?
I had one, and
Yes.
you were trying to explain it to me, but I'll ask the group. The maximum budget of 5 million, I'm going off of my memory now, not remembering exactly. For whatever reason, we had said we would borrow 1.5. I'm seeing 1-ish in my head from SACOG. But was it that across the years it would be a total of 5 million? Is that what it was?
That's right. So this proposed budget of $5 million is for 3 base years for this contract. And then if the 2 option years would need to be executed, they'd need to come back for additional budgeting and resources with the board. But you're correct, CARTA does not currently have that $5 million in the bank, but we're in conversations with partners to provide a loan. Staff have a confidence of providing this recommendation before you. But if we would not execute a contract that we did not have money to pay for, so we would come back with a subsequent action. The last paragraph of the staff report provides some options to the board on if you want to alter from staff recommendation. One of those options is to give us the authority to release and select, but come back to you for final contract execution. And we can talk about that in more detail if you'd prefer.
Okay, I'm going to reflect back just only so I know what I'm voting for, whether I vote with or not. So the $5 million is not in the bank now. Also, technically, we have not authorized that $5 million, technically. Am I getting that right or no? Like to get a loan for 5 million.
That's
We
right.
have not authorized that.
That's right.
Okay, again, I just want to make sure I'm keeping up. So even if we move this forward and we say with the staff recommendation, yes, go with the maximum budget of 5 million, before you were to spend 5 million, you would come back to us to make sure we actually know where we're going to get it from. Okay, all
Absolutely.
right, perfect. Thank you.
Maybe I can just add in a bit to give some reassurance of just our standard contract terms. So
the board, regardless of kind of what path you choose, that certainly we wouldn't spend above the authority we have or the money available. But should the financial situation of CARTA change at any point, you do have the authority to terminate any contracts within 30 days. So you can sign a contract effectively that has a theoretical value that you're not going to necessarily utilize or have those funds even at the time it's executed. But again, that's a policy decision for you all to make.
And we would call that out.
Correct.
What's
Sorry,
that?
sorry,
What's that, Mike?
what I was saying too quietly there is, we would also call that out to you if that's the authorization that we were looking for. If we were saying the money isn't yet in the bank, but we want to move forward and this is what we have, we make sure you were aware.
Great, thank you.
All right. So, yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general question. I'm happy to move staff's recommendation. How big a pool of talent do we have here? Is there a lot of people that do this kind of work?
There are multiple firms that are exceptionally qualified to do this work. So we expect that we will receive multiple competitive proposals for this procurement. It is a relatively small known community, many of which sit in your audience today, Director
Okay,
Soon.
yeah. Is HNTB allowed to, because there's a state law too about, bidding. Are they free of that? Are they allowed to submit RFQs?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And just to clarify on that, so HNDB has been firewalled from the development of this RFP, so they had no role in the future work that would trigger that.
Got it.
provision.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right. So if there are no further questions, I was going to ask, see if there's any public.
If I could add something too.
Yep.
I just wanted to make a note on the last bullet point, the nominate a board member to participate. Just as a reminder, especially it's relevant to Director Soon's comments. There is a small pool here of people we would expect to receive proposals from. Whichever board member is nominated to participate, the conflict of interest rules would still apply. So we would want to make sure that there weren't any Levine Act conflicts where you receive contributions from any of those folks or other potential conflicts that would disqualify you. So not that that prevents any sort of nomination now if we want to move forward on something. I just want to keep that in mind. That way, the director that is selected, if that's the route you go, we can make sure we can clear conflicts and they can actually participate and we won't just be nominating someone that has to conflict out.
No, thank you for raising that, Mike. I think that makes all the sense in the world. I think we want to be fully transparent as we move incrementally. And so to Director Early's point earlier around kind of those checkpoints and maybe at the risk of doubling back to make sure that the contracts, once they're awarded, that this body sees it, the public knows we're announcing it. We're moving incrementally so that we bring everybody along. And then as well, Mike, to your point around the Levine Act and all the confusion that centers around that and all the potential changes that might come as a result of legislative fixes. We just want to be clear that everybody knows what the rules of the game are. So, okay, so if there are no other questions, I will check to see, Robert, are there any slips to speak on this item?
There's no public comment on this item.
Okay, there's no, yes, ma'am.
Chair, so do we need to nominate someone? I think you're chair of
Yeah,
CARTA.
I-
Would you like to volunteer?
I was gonna, no, absolutely not.
I was like second.
I will volunteer to take nominations and I'll take my name off that very quickly.
Okay,
So, but we do need somebody to fulfill the obligation of that third bullet, to participate in the toll program management finalist interviews.
then can I nominate someone else?
You can nominate anybody you want.
All right, Matt, would you like to do it?
I'm on the advisory, I'm on the selection panel already as a member of the.
Okay, never
yeah,
mind.
So
All
I'm,
right.
yeah, thank you.
What do you think? You are as well.
Not everyone
How about
jumped at
Sergio?
this opportunity.
All right, I'll do
Sergio.
it.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no, she's gonna,
Okay, I'll do it.
That,
I'll do it, sure.
Oh, great. You want to
did
do,
it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I love that for you.
Wait, I don't know,
nominate-
can I?
No.
I'm not like an official.
Too late.
official-
I nominate Karina.
sounds like a
I
nomination.
amend my motion to nominate Karina.
All right, so it sounds like a second. So, all right, well, if you're accepting, that doesn't
Sure.
require much more action than that.
All right.
Okay, well, very good. So we have our fulfillment of bullet number 3 with Director Talamontes, sir. So,
Sure, if I could, before you move the motion just quickly, and I take no issue with staff recommendation, I'd just like to offer that the program management contract has 6 base tasks, 4 optional tasks, multi-year, $5 million. So there's a lot in the negotiation and execution. I'd just like to offer to the secretary that if he wants the assistance of the technical advisory group and their consultation as part of the negotiations after selection, the technical advisory group would be happy to help in those negotiations.
Sold.
Yeah.
Sold.
I second that, 100% agree with that. I mean, it's not only the hiring, but the package that comes after that. And I think that's what you're referring to as well. Perfect. I love it.
All right, so you're not gonna say.
I was gonna say, it's a team effort all around, right? So, yeah,
Very good. Okay,
makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Appreciate it.
so it makes a lot of sense. So that with, so are you moving the item? Is that what you were doing?
I can't move the item.
You can't move the item.
I think so too.
Sergio, did.
I will move the item.
That's right, non-voting, excuse me.
No pressure,
No
sir.
pressure.
All right, so we have a motion to adopt staff's recommendation, all
Early
three
sec-
bullets, early seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Thank you very much for all that work as well. Yes, ma'am.
Pause. Did we need to actually vote and nominate Karina, sorry, to be on there? Or are we good just with our nods?
I'm good with moving staff's recommendation, and we'll include that part of the motion was to
Perfect.
confirm the nomination.
Thank you. Apologies, Chair.
No.
Just in case she tries to back out, I wanted to make sure.
That's right.
You see what I did there, right?
There we go. I got you.
It's on the record. Okay, those are the two action items. I believe the rest of it is informational. The next one, we've set aside about 30 minutes, and that's the violations enforcement and policy workshop. So I believe, Sam, you were going to at least initially kick it off, right?
Yes, I'll be doing item 3 and then I'll be turning over for item 4, Chair. So today's workshop is on the violations and enforcement policy for CARTA. Sorry. Seeing our little timeline here. So these are the two that we're going to be talking about today. So we will be coming back in that same August meeting that we're talking about. Toll discounts will be coming back for action on enforcement and violations that we discussed today. So as an informational item, we'll be looking for your feedback and any kind of questions that we can answer to make sure that we include that in the August board meeting. So I'm going to start with toll facility enforcement. This is specifically the type of enforcement that happens on the roadway and is executed by CHP. So a lot of this you're going to hear today is going to be pulling forward things that already exist in vehicle code, as well as some policy decisions that CARTA will have. Okay, so as far as toll enforcement, this is going to be developing a CHP agreement as well as toll enforcement rules. So the CHP agreement will pull forward services specifically to patrol and police the express lanes, which is why you'll have a separate agreement than what CHP is already providing out on facilities now. Those rules will define how CARTA enforces traffic safety as well as the various policies on the physical roadway. Here's a list of the common violations that are enforced by CHP. So as you could see, if someone was to break one of these rules now, those would also be included in CHP's responsibilities. So as I said, some of these are passing through that into the CHP agreement to be able to keep those lanes free of these types of infractions. We can come back to this list if anyone has any questions. And be really specific about the type of enforcement that CHP does, because later we're going to be talking about toll violations. So with any kind of HOV enforcement, the current concept that's used pretty broadly, which you may have heard about in Washington State, as well as California toll facilities, is a manual process. So CHP witnesses the amount of occupants that are in the vehicle and compares that to the readout of technology that the driver has said, this is how many people I have in the car. And if there's a mismatch, CHP will then pull over that vehicle and issue a citation, an occupancy citation, not a toll violation. That fine that comes with that follows the path of the local jurisdiction. So more specifically, CARTA will never see revenue from these types of citations. Toll violations is what we're going to talk about next. And this has some, you have a little bit more opportunity to establish your policy, but again, it has to sit within California Vehicle Code. And it's helpful to follow best practice, especially when you have customers that may come up from other regions. So this toll violations talks about how CARTA enforces the payment of tolls. If you recall, we already have an approved policy on the books for fast track being the acceptable form of payment. There is a lot of best practice that we'll be pulling into these policy decisions. And CARTA will want to make all reasonable attempts to fairly pursue toll revenue. That's what really gets you your fairness on the facilities, to equally enforce your toll violations for non-pavement. So a toll violation is an automatic process. There is no CHP activity that's required for this. If there is a fast track transponder or tag in the vehicle, then that transaction gets paid by a fast track account. If a vehicle is detected in the lane and does not have a fast track transponder, the system sends that data for the customer service center to mail a violation, which has to be sent to the registered owner of the vehicle at the registered owner's address that's on file for the DMV. That process takes a few days, so this is that a longer curve to being able to recoup that revenue through the violation process, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. Toll evasion is considered a civil penalty. The amount of violation can cover for that late payment and evading any kind of administrative fees, fines, assessment, and typically could cover the cost of collection since you are mailing a physical piece of paper to the registered owner. Agencies can collect the toll evasion penalty, so this is revenue that you would see coming back to CARTA along with the tolls. Any kind of violations or fees that were within the civil penalties would be considered revenue to CARTA. Under the CVC code, there are different penalties for bridges and express lanes. Express lanes, as well as full toll facilities, roads, and highways, have a maximum base of $60 and a maximum cumulative of $100. That is per evasion, meaning per toll, per trip. So if you were to drive all over the place for a full weekend and hit different roads around California, you would receive an evasion and a penalty for each one of those tolls. Thought it would be helpful just to give you a snapshot. This commingles bridges as well as toll facilities. So I'll point out that the Bata and Golden Gate Bridge there, those are subject to other maximums that are, I believe, $25 and $50 versus the 60 and 100 that apply to the rest of these facilities that are either full toll roads or express lanes. And they're sorted from less to more. A year or so ago, Assembly Member Ting introduced Assembly Bill 2594, which required toll agencies to have a way for people to be able to pay down their toll debt, so to speak. That was a payment plan that had to go into effect last summer, and it had a qualification of people who were had a household income of 200% of the federal poverty level. That same legislation also had a one-time waiver. This is really for bridges, and that no longer applies. That actually expired in January of this year, but it's just noted here since it's in the same legislation that we're speaking of. CARTA, so we've talked in past CARTA meetings about the various balancing of making sure that we're protecting the revenue stream and executing policy in a fair, equitable way. but also balancing that with really good customer service. And so this is an example of how that would work. We have the policy on the books already that Fast Track is required to be able to use CARTA's lanes. And so a vehicle without a valid Fast Track would be charged the rate, the full rate, that if there were any discounts for any kind of occupancy or vehicle type or anything else, those would not apply. A violation would get the full toll rate and then the penalties that are determined. At the customer service center side, if you had someone who had used it for the first time and they received their toll violation, an example of a rule that could be applied would be set up an account, we'll backdate that account, and you will only pay the toll and that penalty would be waived. And that really aligns with the mission and vision of CARTA. So we'll be talking about those when we talk about more policies, as well as some of the business rules that can really bridge that gap between revenue and customer service. And so this is just pointing out that being able to really have mobility for all communities, allow the room for those customers to have a positive experience if they do come to you first as a violator, would be in line with the mission and vision that have been laid out for CARTA. Namely that customer service one. Believe that is all we have. Oh, sorry. Yes. So specifically, and I'm happy to take any clarifications of what we've talked about as well, especially around citations for occupancy versus toll violations. But we're looking for a discussion and your feedback, or just your first blush on waivers for first time if they enroll in Fast Track. That's something that staff could take to be able to form business rules and have those discussions with a future back office provider. Really how, where the board sits as far as that balance between pursuing revenue and having friendly customer service policies. And then regarding HOV misdeclaration, and I'm happy that you've heard this from other regions and states, because it is a fairly known problem. And when you look at that and what the intent of HOV is intended to do, is to mode shift or to get people to carpool. And the question of whether or not that's working and what that means for things that we've listed here, including revenue leakage, how that's actually established to make sure that it can be executed fairly. So it's not just about the money, but it's really about the people who are following the rules and are using the lane properly and paying their way, as well as other things that may come up around any kind of technology solutions or concerns around privacy. And any other thoughts or questions you have on that, so that we can make sure that we take those back and formulate those in our planning for when we want to come back to you in August.
Fair to say you'd like us to at least look at the questions you've laid out and give whatever feedback we have given the workshop.
Yes, Chair, please.
All right, and that's it for the presentation at the moment.
Yes,
Are
thank you.
Are there thoughts or questions, any sense of kind of where? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of clarifying questions first. So on the manual process for HOV, you said it's like an officer is driving, patrolling, they see, how do they get the information on what the person declared on their transponder?
Sure. So currently the technical concept is to have a transponder that actually declares it. So there's a little switch
Right.
that says 2 people. That is actually talking to the toll system. And if you see on this thing there, we have what we call a beacon. Sometimes it's referred to as a shot clock.
Oh,
And
the
it
3.
posts the number of occupants that have been declared. So if you could imagine a CHP officer out there trying to see a number and then people in the car and say, that one's wrong, I'm going to go after that vehicle, is how the manual process works. And it does require someone to actively have a tag and be a customer and misdeclare. And we do have, there are usually tools also within the system, Director Chapman, that are able to look back at what was declared previously. So there are tools that we can see as far as mixed, if someone's switching while they're actually in process of taking a trip.
Right. Okay, thank you. And then the fines that retained by jurisdiction, so how would that work on this one kind of small stretch? Is that, what jurisdiction gets that on this 17-mile stretch?
I believe it would be the county if it returns back to, as if any moving violation that would be issued there and it follows the same path of any other kind of traffic court tickets.
So the jurisdiction on that stretch would all be Yolo County.
So it follows the same process that existing CHP. So right now, if you speed on the causeway.
Right.
And you get a ticket, whatever process, formula, split CHP uses, I think there's some administrative part, and then it passes through, it follows the same, is what we're saying. It never comes back to CARTA.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I was just gonna say that that's not totally consistent throughout the HOV system in the region. So some of the jurisdictions, Colorado County Transportation Commission years ago helped pay for HOV from Sunrise up to Cameron Park. And so we actually receive partial, a portion of the fines that are generated in Sacramento County from Sunrise to the county line. That's only because there was an agreement years ago that, yeah, so. It's not a lot of money.
Can you put the last slide back up? So what I'll do is ask if there's any public comment on this item. That would
There's
be
no
the-
public comment.
There's no public comment. See none come forward, I'll bring it back. Are there thoughts on what staff is asking, given the workshop nature of what's been presented? Because I have a few thoughts. Yes, sir.
Just a question, and I know you covered already, but to be clear, 'cause something that's really important for me is the customer service and the penetration. So again, if I don't have the transponder, I drive there the first time, I'm able to a one-time exemption if I get an account and backdate it to the day that I drove. Is that the plan, or is that the understanding?
That's up for discussion. If you would like to offer waivers,
Okay.
which is a common practice.
Sure.
Some waivers do require fast track to be established, other ones do not. So sometimes a first time waiver, no questions asked, this is the first time we've ever seen you or your plate on the facility, we're gonna waive that if you pay the toll. That's one type of waiver. Requiring to enroll in fast track is another one, especially if people have multiple violations, so we know that they're probably a known user, so encouraging them and using that as a way to have them enroll in fast track is a positive method towards being able to avoid them having penalties later.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Okay, so for the share your thoughts, I think waivers is a good idea. Also, it's kind of an incentive because it's like, oh, cool, I get my fee reduced if I do this. It works on me for other things. So I go and get it done, I log in and I fix it so that I don't have to pay the extra penalty. And then I think a gradual violation escalation is good too. I mean, the first one being my priority, but then gradual too, because the mission of CARTA is to advance mobility for all communities. And yes, to have a reliable pricing system, but then the vision is also to like have a multimodal network and have it be, help us with the flow of traffic. And so that's the mission of CARTA. And I think we need to stay true to that. And yes, we're going to be able to make some revenues, but that's not the mission of CARTA. It's to be able to advance our transportation system. And then in terms of the misdeclaration, I think fairness is important to me. When we went to Caltrans, I did get the chance to meet the CHP officer that manages some of that. And I asked him like a lot of random questions that had been floating in my mind of how people get through and the dummies that people put and the fake people that people put in their cars. Got a lot of answers, but I think fairness is important because if I'm doing the right thing, I want other people to do the right thing.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I don't imagine a time when we want to bog down on law enforcement, CHP in particular, to be heavy-handed in this space. I think they've got other more important stuff to be doing. I don't think the public would appreciate the time that we would need to recoup, or we don't even recoup any of it, so it wouldn't matter. There's no upside to us other than the enforcement piece. But I think it's not a zero-sum game, right? We don't want CHP spending, I don't think it's appropriate use. There needs to be if that's the case, we need more technology. So I would insert in there to enhancing the revenue leakage, the fairness, the privacy, the maximizing opportunities to utilize technology to bring down the associated costs so that we're not burdening other systems that we all care about to address issues of leakage and that sort of thing. So, and I would double down on the waivers for the first time violators to fold them in the right way. So they're incentivized by creating a pathway for them to join the fold. So. Yes, ma'am.
So I definitely, quite frankly, appreciate the idea of, in any way possible, getting folks to enroll in a fast track account. And so really appreciate the waivers for first time violations. On the aggressive versus gradual, I think I would have a question on how gradual. We heard most recently at our YTD meeting from public comment around being actually really upset about what is happening right outside Solano County and how that particular system is up but not turned on yet, right? And so you have expanded lanes, more cars, but now you don't have the tolling. And so from their perspective, they, this particular public comment individual said, hey, this is actually doing the opposite of what we were supposed to be doing. And so they flagged that. And so here, I can't help but think about aggressive versus gradual violation escalation, because at the end of the day, we still need folks, right, to use it the right way, because the goal is also to ensure that people really are commuting, that we ideally are putting less cars on the road is ultimately one of the goals. And so I have to admit, my question would be how gradual. I don't like the idea of aggressive, right? I don't want to be ticketing people. I don't want to, further burden the system, but the system is only going to be as good as the stick and the carrot. And so I would just raise that. The revenue leakage, it's going to cost money. And I say that next, right? And so although this is not going to bring dollars back to the cost of this particular system is costing, I do want to make sure that it does pay at least for itself, because I don't want to find ourselves in a few years, particularly as we're talking about getting loans, both from SACOG and others, where we can't repay ourselves, and also it's not paying for itself. So there's a certain level of digging out of the hole that we are going to have to do. And I know that's not what we're talking about necessarily here, but when you bring up revenue leakage, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is, this thing is going to be really expensive. And there's going to be cost associated with it, including an executive director, right, and staff. And so at a minimum, it does need to pay for itself. Those are my thoughts.
So one thing that I'm curious about is, this corridor is primarily an interregional kind of, heavy tourism corridor from the Bay Area into Sacramento, and then, ultimately points east of there, like the Tahoe Basin. Full disclosure, being a regional planning agency that sole function is to go out and get money, I'm thinking about the 50 corridor, and I guess I would look at a more aggressive approach, given that this is primarily the Bay Area folks. They're very used to having a toll system. A fine of the toll plus $5 or $15 on a family trip may not hurt some of those travelers. And I just want to be thoughtful about who the users of this corridor are going to be, and what types of trips they're using, and what decisions will this body make that could use that information to maximize the revenue that's collected.
Great, and absolutely. That's exactly what I thought about as well. And so you framed it perfectly. And I'm just wondering if staff has any response in terms of, as we get further down the road, relative to what was just described as kind of as a major corridor for, weekend holiday users. It's a major thoroughfare. How can we begin to try to figure out how we would split those hairs in the event that we wanted to, or is there a way to do that?
Is your question, is there a way to charge a different violation to different types of trips or to different people?
Well, I didn't
And,
look at the
well,
attorney
yeah,
before I
okay.
asked.
No, you're not asking that. Understood. Yeah, so the system would, you would need to have one violation policy for all trips during a certain time in a certain place. But I think this discussion of weighing the pros and cons of a balanced carrot and stick, to Director Early's comment, of making sure that it's not so gradual or so minor. That's what I'm hearing, that people just violate aggressively and we're not reaping the benefits. And in particular, the folks who are finding this loophole are maybe not our residents and our communities, and it's sort of not great. So this conversation is very helpful to us, even though we can't really actualize it in this way.
Can I just add to my comment? You know, I understand there's going to be a very robust discussion around equity, and I think that's very important. I don't want to appear as though I don't think that's important, but an example that comes to mind is the South Lake Tahoe corridor, Highway 50. You know, the parking violations have gone up exponentially over the years, and people are still happy to pay them to access the lake. And so that's what came to mind when I was thinking of these decision points.
Absolutely. And so in August, when we're back after our summer July recess, we'll have before you a traffic and revenue analysis that YOLO TD's consultant team has been developing that shows some of this information, right? What willingness is there to pay from what we see in the data, what amount of trips start and end in different places, right? We know from kind of early analysis that about 60% of trips on the causeway start or end in the Bay Area. So there's a lot of merit to what you all are talking about.
So if I could share.
Yeah.
So as far as sharing thoughts, I totally agree with fellow members up here. I absolutely would love waivers for first time with the idea that they're gonna fully enrolled and have a fast track account. And quite frankly, that gets back to my task 7 comment. I think that is better marketing than actually, right? You know, because we're saying we're giving you the opportunity to become a customer, a good customer, and we want to form that relationship with you, and that's largely you're going to see in ramp up. As far as the violation escalation, you know, we know on average that half of the folks will pay the first notice and about half of the remainder pay the second, and then 25% is lost forever, right? And this is a little bit different now than a law enforcement officer pulling somebody over, because the way we're going to get to them is we're going to mail them something, and we're going to rely on the DMV addressing for that. And that's not always a great database, or it's not a good customer who doesn't update it. I'm not blaming the DMV. And so you run the risk of putting somebody into a position where you've mailed them a couple or a few of these things. And then you've gone into license suspension, and they've moved and they never got any of these. And now not only do you have an issue where you've unfairly, someone would have paid if they knew, but they didn't know, right? Because the way we have to do this. And it's also just really good fodder for negative media. So we just have to be cautious of that when we're setting that dollar amount. And it'd be curious to, know, like, what is that sweet spot when you send that notice to somebody? What are they more willing to pay that they can afford to pay? So that'd be my thoughts.
Do you have some? No.
Yeah, the other thing is, just for sort of awareness, is, and you're right, I'm looking at the users of this corridor. Look, they change from day to day. The weekend is some type of user, weekdays is another. There's always the Bay Area, travelers always. But again, just want to make sure that everybody's cognizant of that. And then again, remind everybody that our environmental document, we made committed to Hot 3 Plus, is exempt from fees. So that's something to keep in the back of our minds. And last but not least is technology is changing. While CHP, as was described earlier, has the ability through contracting methods to, the old-fashioned way, say, look and try to determine occupancy. There might be some technology solutions that will allow us to better trace that and minimize that leakage. I totally understand the concern about leakage, but that is something that the team is working on to try to minimize through not just potential contracts with CHP and enforcement, but also the use of technology, because we are very keenly aware of that. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, if there are no other, do we already ask for public comment?
There's no public comment.
There's no public. All right, so does that help, Kathleen? Yep, you guys are good? Okay. All right, no action needed. That's informational. We got about 25 minutes left for the hour of 3:30. You asked for 20 minutes on this next item, and that is a CARTA multi-year implementation roadmap.
Yes, and I am going to introduce my deputy PM, Sadie Mae Palmetier is here. I know you've probably seen her, but today you actually get to hear her. She's been working in the background with our task lead, Will Allen, to develop the implementation roadmap that you saw in the packet. So I'm going to do a quick swap out and let her present. Hello, directors. All right, so as Sam mentioned, this is our, yes, did you have a question?
Nope. No,
Okay.
it's all yours.
This is our second informational item before you today. It is the CARTA multi-year work plan, which we colloquially are referring to as the CARTA roadmap. So as you saw on the last slide, today I'm going to be giving you a very high-level overview of the roadmap. It will be coming back before you in August as a draft final, where we can dig more into the details as you see fit. The roadmap's purpose is to provide a high-level overview of a schedule, a narrative, and a cost estimate for all the activities that CARTA needs to complete before it starts collecting revenue on the YOLO 80 project. It was included in H&TB's scope of work as task 3. So what this means in actuality is that the roadmap is a timeline to Director Villegas's question earlier. It's a timeline of tasks that work together to achieve the key milestones CARTA needs to be operationally ready to collect revenue. And so when I say operational readiness, this is really what I mean. It's all this stuff that is up here on the slide. And I know this might look like a lot, but I want to highlight that all of these different categories, all these different areas of focus will be taken in bite-sized pieces, just like the toll policy adoption process has been going on throughout this year. I also wanted to highlight that some of this work has already started. So you see the final bullet on my left, the adoption of the toll policy process. We are making good progress towards achieving a toll policy resolution adopted in December. A lot of this work will also inform the toll ordinance for enforcement, which will specifically cover violations and enforcement. There's also ongoing work related to procurement and contracting. So Kathleen and Eric have been leading conversations with back office providers throughout the state of California. And there's also the ongoing development of the YOLO TD or YOLO 80 roadside procurement, which is being led by the YOLO 80 team. Wanted to also note that the roadmap will hopefully answer a lot of the questions that the board has had in the past. So I know in April, Director Talamantes asked about when are we actually going to hire people? So the roadmap addresses those questions, lays out the roles and responsibilities of CARTA staff in combination with the CARTA consultants that you heard about in item 2, as well as different partner agencies involved in this process. So these bite-sized pieces are strung together as tasks that include embedded logic. So we're mapping out dependencies between each of these tasks so we know what needs to happen first and afterwards. This also helps us identify what we call critical paths, which are tasks that, if delayed, will delay the entire project. These are really important for us to be looking at, particularly as we have an aggressive timeline to meet to achieve key milestones, such as the revenue service with YOLO 80. Also helps us keep on track. All of these tasks are going to build up into the achievement of the milestones that I talked about in the roadmap purpose. And I want you to, before you get too wedded to the dates that you see on the slide, know that these are all very much assumed, and a lot of factors may change in order for these dates to, to come to fruition. But all of these milestones are necessary for us to reach our ultimate goal.
And I want to note that as you'll see in August, the way that we have built out the roadmap is to include both a target date and a scheduled date for each milestone. So the target date is a fixed date, much like you're seeing on the screen. And then the scheduled date is built upon that embedded logic. So we can basically see how we're tracking with each of our milestones. So if we are ahead of our target date or we're behind, we know if we need to adjust resources, change our, retool as necessary. So there are 19 sections of the roadmap. These correspond with a lot of the activities that you heard in Kathleen's item on item 2. I wanted to note that the 3 sections you see highlighted in gray are the main areas where are the main milestones. So all those tasks are really building up to those. So all of the milestones in those 3 sections have embedded logic that built into them. I think Director Villegas, you had the question about when the different when the different agreements, when the different items will be coming before the board. All of that detail is included in section 4, the CARTA leadership dashboard. This includes a section for board agreements, any kind of board items that come forward, as well as involvement with the CARTA tag. So that's probably the most important section for you all to be thinking about as this comes again in August. But just to give you a flavor of some of the other type of information that you'll see in the roadmap. Section 10, which covers the maintenance agreements relevant to the YOLO 80 lanes. Describes all the different agreement processes, the development timeline for that, and the main touch points that CARTA will have with the roadside toll system integrator. So that was a very brief overview, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you may have. Thank you.
There's no public comment.
Talked a little bit about making sure that we are transparent, right, around what CARTA is doing and under what, what are the timelines that we are operating under, and what are the key milestones, and what are those things that we are voting on, that we are kind of the ink's starting to dry on some of this stuff, and it's going to be very difficult to meet our milestone timelines if we're constantly doubling back on everything. So just want to make sure we're moving forward incrementally and with full transparency. And I think what you're addressing here is going to help address some of that. So, very good. Thoughts, questions, comments? Yes, sir.
So I think, it'll be helpful for this board to, be well aware of when, those milestones for the I-80 project and the CARTA development. I mean, we're kind of flying building the plane as we're flying it. So I think it'll be helpful to know if when you're checking in on those milestones, where those things line up, so that if there's CARTA decisions that need to be made that could impact the I-80 project, it'd be helpful to know that early and often.
That's the idea, is to have some sort of a health report that we're providing to the board. Here's your really major milestones. Here's where we're at on them. And if one of them is at risk or some sort of issue, bring an item with a larger conversation to you all to understand why we're behind, what we're going to do to get back on track, so the board can keep an eye on the overall health of what is a very complicated project.
So speaking of that, and I know it's in here and I hear it all the time, but I still want to make sure I'm understanding it. In terms of the outward facing customer service, public relations, and I lump that all in together, what is your sense of when that will actually be starting, so that, because I cringe at the idea that people who are frustrated with our freeway systems, and the 80 corridor is part of that they're looking forward to the end of that construction, only to find out right on the heels of that sort of, ribbon cutting, that there's now a ground, a shell. Yes. We're all standing there next to them with another phase of it, which is the tolling piece, which they'll be hearing, most folks, for the very first time. So it's just, I just want to make sure that we are thoughtful around the transition from one to the other and to the extent that we can.
Yeah, I can kick it off high level, and then if you have anything specific from the roadmap you want to add. So just to clarify, so the YOLO 80 toll project is currently under construction. So for the traveling public, they won't notice a difference. The carewell has been up there, the lane moves have been moved, so it'll just be all together, and then we'll have a toll lane. So I think that will help a bit. But the other piece is really, I hear you, and so I'll make sure in the toll program management contract that we try to front load that task 3 public communication strategy and the development of some of those materials so that we can get those off sooner rather than later. And then really the strategy this year is focused on the jurisdictions, elected officials, our partners, making sure that there's a bit more of a like no wrong door on the toll question so that you all and your colleagues feel more empowered to understand what's going on and who they call and how all of this works. So that's our focus this year.
Perfect. Yes, sir.
And just to add a little bit more detail on, which is really important topic about the coordination of what's taking place here with the physical truth of the field for the YOLO 80 project. That's why it's so important that we Caltrans have membership in the TAG team as well as here, so that we can have that close coordination. Right now, I can tell you is that date for implementation, we should be good, you know, barring any unforeseen. We should be ready to go to move forward. But again, we will have that close coordination, that periodic, really monthly check-ins to make sure there's no surprises. That's a commitment.
Perfect. Very good. Very
And
helpful.
if I may add to Director Aceves' comment, so one of the highlights of the roadmap is we have an interface milestone, which is section 1, which outlines where those pieces that you're just describing come in. So we won't necessarily be adopting the master schedule from, you know, the civil construction or the TSI contract. They'll be maintained in separate schedules, but those key milestones we will be incorporating so we can see how, because some of the pieces that CARTA will be responsible will be play off of those key dates, right? So we'll be able to see how different inputs are affecting each other.
Okay, with that, so that's it. All right. Yes, sir.
Just wondering, when might staff brief the full SACOG board on all the great work that this board's been doing?
Yeah, I have a meeting with Executive Director Corliss on Tuesday to talk about this, but the plan is to hopefully do it in August, September timeframe to have a larger conversation with one of the SACOG committees. I know there's a lot of interest in understanding where we're at and how toll policy has developed. So we'll hopefully formalize that, get you a better sense of date. Of course, there's a lot on SACOG board and committee's plate this year, so trying to be mindful of everyone's time as well. And then just as a reminder to the members that they can request CARTA staff to come address an item at your separate board should you feel there's a need to as we progress along here like SACOG has.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, so with that, there are no other comments or questions. That takes care of our formal agenda items. Under other matters, are there any other items anybody wants to bring forward for future consideration? Seeing none, that then concludes. We will then reconvene Monday, August 4th, which is coming up pretty quick. Monday, August 4th, 2025 at 12:30 here in the SACOG boardroom. All right, very good.